Morning, everyone. Welcome to Money Talks with Attorney Coral. I am Attorney Coral Pleas, the host of the show that we bring live to you each and every Thursday morning from 11 a.m. to noon Central Time on WNOV Radio. That is 860 AM and 106.5 FM. Please be sure to tune in every week because we try to bring topics that are useful and educational for the community. It's not necessarily legal related, but sometimes it is. In recent weeks, we've been talking about insurance in general and the importance of having insurance, particularly. A lot of calls came in last week because in Wisconsin, there was a flood in the month of August that caused a lot of people a lot of problems, a lot of property damage, a lot of loss of personal property, and all those sorts of things, some of which being covered by insurance, and unfortunately, a lot of which that wasn't. So it's a real issue that people are dealing with and going through. And so we'll be covering that a little bit more in the weeks to come. I want to bring on different guests that maybe have a specialty in different areas of insurance because, like we talked about last week, there's all different types of insurance that people should consider buying into for your own protection. Some of them that we mentioned last week were health insurance, for instance, so that you can safeguard against any injuries or illnesses or ailments that might come your way that might otherwise cost you a lot of out of pocket dollars. um, and then other types of insurance. In particular, last week we were talking about property insurance or homeowners insurance. Some people, if you don't own your home, you might have renters insurance. We talked about auto insurance because that's another big one, and that's where a lot of my practice focuses when people have car accidents. And yeah, that's one definitely we're going to want to talk more about because sometimes people think, well, I don't have a car that's very valuable. I don't want to have a lot of insurance. I don't want to spend money to pay a high premium to have coverage. Well, sometimes you need to go ahead and spend that money to make sure you're covered against other drivers out here in the community that may not have insurance. They could cause damage to you. You want to make sure that you're going to be able to have compensation for yourself, sometimes for your injuries, sometimes for your medical expenses, sometimes it's for property damage to your car, sometimes it could be lost wages, lost earnings. It just depends on the extent of the damages, the severity of the accident, and what level of protection that you actually contract and pay for. So we'll be talking about those topics more in the coming weeks because I do think it's important, and was very pleased with the calls that we received last week. It helps when the community is listening and able to call in and add to the discussion because that's what I like, to prompt other people to call in and share your knowledge, share your experience, share what you know about the topic because again, it's educational. I'm not offering legal advice with anything that is said on the show. This is not the forum for that. Legal advice needs to be one on one. Once you've called me, once you've made an appointment and come into my office, once I've been able to do an adequate conflict check to make sure that there's no issues with respect to giving advice. And then we can talk about your specific situation, the specific scenario, the specific facts that relate to your situation. So it doesn't do well to try to speak specifics over the air. It's just this is not the forum to have an attorney client relationship or to offer any type of specific advice. So with that being said, I'm going to give the number out if anyone wants to call in. I'm going to change the topic a little bit today, but the number here for the station is 414-444-5250. That is 414-444-5250 or 5253. If you like to add anything, even if it's from the topic that we were touching on last week or in the coming weeks, as I said, we'll mention it, that we'll talk about it again, or anything that we're going to touch on today. Just like to encourage the audience to jump in and add your opinions. So, all right, I said a mouthful to introduce the show. As you all know, the show is sponsored by Columbia Savings and Loan Association.
Right.
I have on my Columbia Savings and Loan Association shirt today. So, if anybody's watching on
I
YouTube,
thought you told us on last week that you were going to be bringing those in for Jermaine and myself. Did I hear
oh,
something like that?
well, you know what? I thought I brought them in before and then never saw you guys wear them.
Oh no, I never
Is
received it.
that what it was?
I
Are
never
you
got one.
certain of that?
I'm positive.
110% sure.
Okay, 110% sure.
Yeah.
Then I can't top that.
Yeah.
All right.
I
Well,
wanted to ask you though, while you were talking about before you shift gears, when you spoke about the insurances and different things of that nature, could you speak to or kind of like inform me on when I hear people talk about gap insurance? What exactly is that?
well, the way that I most commonly see gap insurance is because I deal with a lot of auto accidents and auto insurance claims, and what ends up happening is okay. Give you an example of when I've seen it recently, relatively recently. There was a young couple that bought a vehicle, about a $40,000 vehicle, let's just say, might have been 45, but a
Hmm.
pretty expensive car. When they drove off the lot, and the vehicles do depreciate quickly.
Hmm.
Um, so in this case, they own the car for, I don't know, maybe close to a year. I'm just going to give round figures because I don't recall the precise facts. But they own the vehicle for about a year and they
Hmm.
made the payments on the vehicle. But then the wife had this vehicle out and had an accident, which basically totaled it. So the vehicle being a total loss, and then when it came to looking at the insurance policy in terms of what would be paid out for the loss of the vehicle, her pain and suffering and injuries were a whole separate category of issues that had to be dealt with. But the property damage was also part of the claim. Well, at that point, there was some research done on the Kelly Blue Book value or whatever they were looking at to evaluate the value of this vehicle.
Hmm.
And let's just say, for sake of, just for sake of math, these aren't precise figures, but let's say the Blue Book came back and said that this vehicle was now only worth $30,000. But because of the terms of the finance agreement that they had on this vehicle, they still owed significantly more than that, even though they had made all of their payments on time. So again, so the figures I'm using might not work exactly, but let's just say that they still owed $32,000 on this vehicle.
Hmm.
Well, the insurance was then liable to pay the 30,000 that it was determined that it was worth, but in their case, they had purchased what was called gap insurance, and that gap insurance filled the difference between what the regular policy was obligated to pay and what they still owed on the vehicle, so that they didn't have to walk away owing this $2,000 balance yet to the finance company for a vehicle that they no longer had. So they had purchased what was called gap insurance coverage to literally fill the gap between what the Blue Book value of the policy said it was and what it was determined they yet owed to the finance company.
And that only works towards the vehicle, not pain and suffering or personal injury or
Correct.
any of the above.
Yep, because those types of damages are evaluated under a separate provision of the policy.
Hmm.
So there's one provision that will govern, the how the property damage is dealt with. Is there a deductible? All those sorts of things that are part of your contract. And then there's another part of the policy that deals with the limits for bodily injury. Let's say, for instance, and then that's where your injuries, your medical expenses, and your pain and suffering, that sort of thing gets addressed. So
Okay.
property damage is typically settled first when there's a claim because it's so contractual, it's so objective rather than being subjective that
Hmm.
it's usually easier to just go ahead and get that out of the way. Then you deal with this whole notion of pain and suffering because by definition, that's more of a subjective finding than an objective one.
Hmm.
Although there can be objective indicators of pain and suffering. So let's say, for instance, you can see on an X-ray if somebody broke a bone or not, right? So that's an objective finding that up, I can see it right there. They did break a bone. But if someone just says, "Oh, my back hurts," and you do an X-ray or an MRI and you don't see anything, then it becomes their own, what they're telling you rather than what you
Right.
can see.
Right.
So then that's where that, it's a little, it's I don't want to use the word mushy, but it's not precise, as something as property damage can be.
Hmm.
Because then, okay, so what's your pain and suffering worth? Well, how bad did it hurt on a scale of 1 to 10? What were you not able to do? And what type of work do you do? Do you sit all day? Do you stand all day? So it can affect each person differently. So that's where, so that the gap doesn't apply to those, because those are dealt with under separate provisions of the contract.
All
Just to
right.
answer your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, wonderful. I appreciate the questions, because I love it, Debo, when you enter in, because you ask the questions that everybody's thinking that it's educational. Then
Mhm.
it becomes, it's better. It's better for the show. It's better
Right.
for the community. It's better for the conversation. So,
I like to try to take advantage of all of this wealth of knowledge that you bring.
oh well, thank you.
So try to pick, and get me free consultation here. It's free of charge here. Can't beat that.
Well, hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate it too. So now I'm going to flip it back on you guys, because I brought a question. I've asked this once before on the show, but I'm going to bring it up again. Let's talk a little bit about life expectancies and estates, because you guys know that that's part of the practice that I do. And sometimes there's my experience that people wait too long sometimes before they start thinking of putting an estate plan in place. So I'm going to start with you, Devo.
Uh-oh.
What do you think is the average life expectancy in the United States for Black males? And I pulled this off of a chart that, I did some research on, actuarial charts and that sort of thing. So there may be some variation depending upon what chart people are looking at, but bear with me. I'm going to go with the numbers that I found. I just want to see ballpark what you guys think. What is the average life
male.
expectancy in the United States for Black males?
Life expectancy, Black male, 62, 63.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Jermaine,
What's the question?
the question is, Jermaine, we're in class. No sleeping in the back of
it's
the
over.
classroom.
It's over. I get kicked out of class.
What do you think may be the average life expectancy in the United States for Black males?
Whoa.
Debo said 62 or 63.
The average life expectancy rate?
Yes. How long do Black men on average live? How old do you guys get to be on average in the United States?
I know, man, that stat has changed from previous years.
And it does.
I would have said back in the day about 70, but nowadays I want to say about 65.
Wow. Okay. So you're saying back in the day it would have been higher? You
Yeah.
think it's gone down?
Yeah.
Why do you think it's gone down?
I think it's gone down because of a lot of men, they don't go to the doctor. They don't get checked out. And I know it was like that back in the day as well, but it was just a whole different culture back then than it is now.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting.
You got a drum roll over there?
Yeah, do the drum roll.
do I have a
Because
drum
I'm going
roll?
to tell you what my
Nope.
research revealed.
So that's next. We need a drum roll.
Yeah, we need a drum
Okay,
roll.
we'll get you a drum roll.
Yes,
next
we
time,
need a
Cole.
drum roll.
All right.
We don't have a drum roll?
No, but I got the wrong answer.
So,
Well, I asked you what you think, so there is no wrong answer. I'm
Oh,
about to reveal what the
okay.
research showed, but is there any? Do I get a little music or something in there to lead me into?
No.
All right. Well, then I'll go ahead with it. So Debo said 62 or 63, and you said 65. The average life expectancy in the United States for black males is 69 years
Oh, I
old.
was close.
Mm.
Yeah, you were close even when you said, I think it might have been about 70,
Yeah.
but you thought that it may have gone
Was
down
it?
because
Yeah.
black males don't go to the doctor. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know the stats on that.
Mm.
But 69 years is the average.
Wow.
Right.
That just
Yeah.
means we were both in the ballpark.
You both were, but I was actually a little surprised that you both came in a little bit low because that's so young. Even
Yeah.
even in my mind,
But then I'll tell
69.
you the
Yeah, that's
reason
young.
I
Yeah.
did it that way is because when you said black males as a whole, when we look at the younger generations, they're dying even sooner.
Yeah.
Right.
So that pulled my number down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was part of my equation too.
And that very well may be why it's only 69.
Right.
For black males.
Just out of
Okay.
curiosity, what did you do it in the opposite way as to what the expectancy rate of a Caucasian?
Actually, I didn't, but I could circle back to that because I can check it when we go to break and then come back to that.
It was
Um,
just out of curiosity.
Yeah,
no,
that'd
that's
be
a very
something
good
nice to
question.
check, yeah.
That would be something to know.
To compare.
So, but before we get to that, then I'm gonna keep you both on the hot seat, and I'll start with you, Debo. What do you think is the average life expectancy in the United States for black females?
70, 75.
75. All right. Jermaine, you still in class?
What do I? Because our show check out quick. I want to say, I think it's older for women. I'm say about 70. Yeah, I'm about with Debo like 72 to about 75.
72 to 75.
Yeah.
Okay. So, according to my research, the average life expectancy in the United States for black females is 74.6
Wow.
years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Debo, you pretty much had it on the nose. You both pretty much had it on the nose because there we go, the applause. There we go.
Yeah. I was paying attention in class.
Yes, you both
I
get a
just
gold
cheated
star
off
for
the
that
dude
one.
sitting next to me.
That's what you did.
I
That's
cheated
what you
off
did.
his paper.
Well, you were smart giving it a range.
Yeah.
See, so that was another way to come about it. So yeah, the life expectancy for black females is higher than that of black males, but still when we break, I'll go ahead and look up the counterpart, well the what for the white Americans what it would be. But yeah, so my purpose even of bringing this up today is because sometimes people think that estate planning is for people who are very, very elderly. And the point that I'm trying to drive home is our life expectancies are on average not that long. I mean, gosh, I don't know. I must have been really young when I used to think that 50 was old because, I tag that. You know what I mean? I'm glad that I know that it isn't. So well, once you hit 50, 60 isn't old. So yeah, so it's really just about perspective, when you come to know. And a lot of times people are blessed with longevity in their families. You guys have anybody in your families that's lived beyond, these expectancies? Like what's the oldest black male in your family, Debo, or the
Currently
whoever
or
have lived the
ever?
oldest ever?
My great grandfather was 102 when he passed.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
My grandmother on my dad's side is currently 101.
And she's still alive.
Yes.
That is amazing.
Still living in her home. She doesn't live alone, but
Right.
she's there.
Wow. Okay. Now those are some impressive numbers. And
Mhm.
even for it to be your great great grandfather that lived to be in his hundreds, you said 103?
102.
102.
Yeah.
So that's something because that was many generations ago.
Oh, absolutely.
So he must have taken good care of himself, to Jermaine's point earlier.
Southern life, Southern
Mhm.
way of living. Moved up here. He was already 80 years old when he moved up here. So,
Okay.
yeah, they lived a great life. That Southern way of living.
Yeah, clean living.
Yeah.
Clean living will get you that far. What about you, Jermaine? Who are the oldest people in your family?
Well, my uncle. Well, no, I got some. some older people that's in the family that's in their 90s, but they're in the South, of course.
In the South?
Yeah, in the
Must is
South.
it something to this being in the South?
Well, I think it's just it's less stress. I don't know because
I don't believe that. I think it's fresh
yeah, it's
foods
just
and
just the
all the
air.
preservatives and all of that stuff. I mean, you're growing your own, and
Right.
it's just a way of life. You go to bed early, you get up
Yeah,
early.
yeah, that's true
It's a
because
different livelihood.
when I was in the South, it's one thing I do remember, and that the air smells differently. It just feels different, you know,
Mm-hmm.
down there. So, um, in it's yeah, I just think it's the whole atmosphere of the South.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah. No, I can see that. I can see that. Right now, um, I have one aunt in Chicago that I believe is about 95 or 96 years old. And my mother is currently 92, about to turn 93 in January. So she's going strong. Um, my dad lived almost to 90, so he was 89. We lost him 9 years ago yesterday to the day. But he definitely, he did the darn thing as far as the men in our family. He outlived all the other men, but right here in Milwaukee, he almost made it to 90. So that was good. And it's funny that with what you're saying though, all of these people were from the South originally. So maybe something to be said for that. So okay, so the moral of the story is, we don't like to think about um estate planning and potentially going to nursing homes and all of that. Debo, you mentioned that your gram still lives on her own. She's got someone with her, not completely on her own, but sometimes people in their 50s and 60s can become debilitated and can't care for themselves. So we need to talk about that a little bit in terms of how you handle that, how do you navigate that, and things that you ought to do. And we'll talk more about that when we come back from the break. So thank you so much. You're listening to Money Talks with Attorney Coral, starring Debo and Jermaine. We'll be back after the break. We're back with Money Talks with Attorney Coral. I'm happy to be here and in the studio with Debo and Jermaine working with me today to just try to present a topic that's it's difficult. You know, a lot of times people don't want to talk about estate planning and putting a will together or putting a trust and those sorts of things. It can be, you know, a touchy subject, something that's not fun to deal with. But you know, we charge towards things that are difficult rather than run away from them because we know that problems don't go away, right? And you want to be as prepared as you can be. Everyone should eat right and exercise and try to live as long as we can. But at the same time, we're talking about this statistics or these statistics this morning about the average life expectancy in the United States for Black males, which we discussed before the break, and that it was 69 years. So I took a quick minute, Debo, and I did look it up what the life expectancy average in the United States for white males, and it is 76.4 years. So almost 77, but not quite. But still several years more than the life expectancy for Black males in the United States. Does that surprise you guys at all?
Not at all for me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's been known forever that white folks tend to live a lot longer than us.
Right. Right. And anything that I've read, I know they attribute that to healthcare, access to healthcare,
Hmm.
or access to healthier foods and that sort of thing. I mean, I haven't, you know, done a deep dive on the topic to dispute that in any way, but that's my understanding
It
as
kind
to
of
why
makes
that
sense. I mean,
tends to
when you
be.
start looking at diets and things of that nature, we are more apt or more susceptible, if you will, to high blood pressure.
Sure.
I think we overall are affected by diabetes more than the other race.
Mm-hmm.
So it all makes sense.
It does. And now that you say that too, even with respect to diabetes, just if you pay attention to, you know, celebrity news, which I do, I'll admit that I get into that a little bit, but I won't be able to name names right now. But I know that there were a handful of Black males in recent years that were celebrity status people who died in their 40s or even 50s from the symptoms of diabetes. Like it was the neglect of that condition that led to an early death. So it happens a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that
I think I saw. I know BB King was a spokesperson at one point before his demise.
okay, that's right.
I think I saw, was it Danny Glover? Somebody else
Oh,
doing an Ozempic commercial.
okay.
So
I haven't seen that one.
yeah, I think it was him. Don't quote me on it,
Mm-hmm.
but again, uh, we tend to be affected by these diseases more than other races.
Mm-hmm. And if the access to medical care isn't the same, then that's an issue as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'd be
Absolutely.
curious to see, if you were to take a Caucasian and an African American baby and put them on the same diets
Mm.
and all the way through life and just see what how that fares out
Mm-hmm.
from a medical standpoint.
Yeah, that would be interesting. That would be an interesting study to see. No, absolutely. I'd be curious about that one. I don't know how you'd set that up and control it, but
Right,
it would be
right.
that would be an interesting
Or
one.
or give that Caucasian chitlins, greens,
Fried
ham, yeah,
chicken.
macaroni and cheese.
Yeah,
Have them eat the same diet and just see how that fares out.
yeah, yeah. That'd be something to see. No, really. It really would. Um so I'm going to ask an obvious question. So do you guys think that the average life expectancy in the US for white females is higher than that of everyone else's or lower?
Higher,
Absolutely. So,
Karen.
yes. So the average life expectancy for white females is 80 to 81 years in the United
Hmm.
States. So yeah, theirs is higher than anyone else's.
Than anybody else walking the planet.
Right. 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 Yep. Because other statistics break it down amongst other races. I just kept it, kind of general for purposes of our discussion today. But no, other races as well. The white females is the highest.
Yeah.
That I can say from the charts that I was looking at in the United States. Now I don't know about other places,
They
Japan
look
or some
they
places,
look be
maybe it
pretty
might be
old
different.
in those other countries. They if they're not bombed out or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you see Chinese and they get pretty old.
Right, right, right. Well, I think they eat consistently over there too,
Hmm.
and of course, this is something that we'll probably bring in maybe bring Shonda Moore back, the trainer that came for the first of the year,
Hmm.
kicking off the talk about health and health is wealth, to talk about the importance of the healthy eating and all of that and how that relates to our productivity during our working years and what we're able to accomplish. So it all is connected to the topic of money. So I'll have to give her a call and bring her back and talk about that some more now that we're bringing all of this up, because that's definitely a factor. And we've got to control that which we can control, and that's one thing that we can all collectively agree to do better is to eat better and exercise more easily said than done, I know, but I think that that's a good goal to have. So okay, so what does all this have to do with the topics of um, estate planning and that sort of issue? Well, because don't if you do become debilitated and can't care for yourself, then you might have to consider being cared for in a nursing home, and that can be an expensive proposition. So I wanted to talk through that a little bit today, what that looks like. Maybe you're a person who has children and you're thinking, well, I don't have to worry. My kids will take care of me. Well, what if your children have jobs and they're not able to take off and take care of you? What if they have families that, place a demand on them such that they're not able to take off and take care of you? Or maybe you feel that if you have to rely on your children, you might feel that you're being some sort of a burden, and maybe just your own personal feeling about it is that you don't want to be a burden. Maybe that son or daughter of yours will say, you're my parent, you will never be a burden to me. But maybe you've got your own convictions about it and you just feel that you don't want to even potentially be a burden. Um, so I want to just stress again that this is informational only. The scenarios that I'm about to share, it's educational, it's not legal advice, but I do want to see if I can describe two different scenarios where there's two couples that they were the same ages, lived on the same block, had homes that were worth the same amount of money. Each of these couples, two couples, each owned a $300,000 home. Their homes were paid free and clear, right? No mortgages. And each couple also had $400,000 in savings. Okay. So keep all of that in mind. I hope this will be a scenario that will play well over the air. I know if we're sitting in a classroom and I can write this up on a chalkboard, it's a little bit easier to teach, but I'm going to try to do it by just describing the decisions that one couple made at versus in terms of estate planning versus decisions that the other couple made as relates to estate planning that yielded dramatically different results. Okay. Same ages, same block, similar homes worth exactly the same amount, $300,000, both paid in full. Each couple has $400,000 in savings. Okay. So the first couple, I'm going to call them George and Ruth. George and Ruth did not make any estate plan to deal with their home or the money that they had in savings. They kept everything that they owned in their own personal, individual names. Okay. George unfortunately became ill at the age of 78 years old, and he became so incapacitated at 78 that he had to go into a nursing home. Ruth was fine. She stayed in the family home, but unfortunately, George, she was not able to care for George at home. So George had to be placed in a nursing home. And he went and he lived for 3 additional years. So 3 years in the nursing home. And there was a cost to that. Nursing home care can be expensive. So for purposes of this example, George's nursing home cost was $7,000 a month. So multiply that out. If hopefully my math is good, we're gonna rely on it right now, whether it's good or not. Um, but multiply that out for the 3 years that George lived in the nursing home, and it cost that family $250,000 to pay. Now, mind you, they had $400,000 in savings, right? So they were able to pay this $250,000 out for Georgia's nursing home care. Now, Ruth lived for several years as well. She was healthy until she reached the age of 82. So at the age of 82, she too was debilitated and had to go to a nursing home. She spent 5 years in the nursing home. And this time the cost had gone up by the time she hit that age, and it went up to $8,000 a month. Okay. So George and Ruth had to spend down their savings to pay first for George's nursing home care, which then after 400,000 is what they had, right? Once they paid for his nursing home care, they had only $150,000 left in their savings, plus their home, which was valued at 300,000. Let's just pretend the number stayed consistent for sake of my example. I know values of properties go up and down, but let's keep it at 300 to try to ease the confusion of this as I'm describing it on the radio rather than able to write it up on a chalkboard. I like to use this example in teaching in a classroom setting, but I'm hoping that it'll translate well enough over the air that everyone will follow. Okay, so again, Ruth stayed 5 years in a nursing home, and it cost $8,000 a month because it went up from 7,000 when George was there. So her cost was about $480,000 for Ruth in the nursing home for those 5 years. Well, she was able to pay the first 18 months from her savings because that 150 was still left. So take the $480,000 that it cost to have Ruth in the nursing home, take away the 150 that was still in their savings, they still owed, there's a deficit, right? Then of $330,000. Well, Ruth passes away, and I forgot to tell you that these couples both have kids. They're adult children, however many kids, it doesn't matter. But Ruth dies, and the kids think that they were left their parents' home free and clear because their parents' home had been paid off. Well, the next thing they know, the Medicaid estate recovery people from the state of Wisconsin come along and put a $330,000 lien on that $300,000 house, and the kids were left with nothing. It turns out that it's a deficit, right? It's a $30,000 deficit estate because this couple did not do any estate planning whatsoever. They left everything in their name, and unfortunately, um, because of the way things were handled, and both parents ended up in the nursing home without any protection for their assets. When all was said and done, even the home was lost. Okay, so that's one scenario. in terms of how things could go. But I mentioned to you that there were two couples. So the other couple is James and Addie. All right, I'm making these names up. All right, so don't think I'm talking about anyone in particular. I picked some names just out of my head, and this is what I came up with. Okay, James and Addie, same situation. They're exactly the same ages as George and Ruth. They are neighbors. They live on the same block. They have similar homes, each worth $300,000. And just like George and Ruth, James and Addie had $400,000 in their savings account. But what did they do differently? Well, James and Addie decided to seek some legal guidance and counsel for having a solid estate plan. And they took timely, correct legal actions, and they did it when they were in their 70s, okay, because they saw some other family member who failed to plan lose everything. So they said, we don't want that to be us. So when they were in their 70s, and I'm just saying, for example, that this is when they did, it could have been in their 60s, could have been in their 50s. It wouldn't matter as long as it's done before you end up needing this type of nursing home level of support. Okay, so James and Addie sought legal counsel and they created a proper family trust. And, it can be a revocable trust or an irrevocable trust, depending upon the facts and circumstances. Whoever is the legal counsel will guide and make recommendations about the type of trust is best for you. Um, we do know that revocable trusts are not necessarily foolproof if something happens and you have to go into nursing home care, so just be careful of that. An irrevocable trust might be a better tool depending upon your circumstances. So let's just say that James was 78 years old and needed to go to the nursing home right away because this estate plan was done. He qualified for Medicaid. He spent 3 years in the nursing home and he died. None of their assets had to be touched to pay for that because they were protected in the proper legal trust um, document. And then Addie was 82. Again, she spent 5 years in a nursing home. And again, she qualified right away to have state aid to pay for that nursing home care. And so, what ended up happening once they both were passed away, their children, their family, their heirs were able to keep the home valued at 300,000 and the savings account valued at 400,000 because of the planning that they did to structure things differently. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. It looks like it's time to take a break, but we will talk more about the differences and just some helpful hints that I would like to share. We won't get into specifics of any plan, but just some helpful hints when we come back from the break. We'll be right back with more Money Talks from Attorney Coral. Welcome back. This is Money Talks with Attorney Coral. Each and every week, this show is sponsored by Columbia Savings and Loan Association. I'm wearing my Columbia Savings and Loan Association t shirt today. And next week, I will be back with Columbia Savings and Loan Association t shirts for Debo and Jermaine.
All
Going on.
right, because I so looked up like, okay, make sure you include me in that
Yep,
equation.
yep, nope. Going on the record. Going on the record with that. I'm remiss because I really thought I had done that before, but maybe it wasn't. I think it. Yeah, it might have been. I think it might have been before you started working the show,
Yeah,
Jermaine. I think that's what it
because I would
was.
have been wore my Colombian
Maybe
savings.
maybe I wasn't
Yeah.
working the show either then.
Yeah. I don't think you were, Debo. It might have. It was. It actually. I know who it was, and it wasn't you. So I apologize that
Okay,
I thought it was
we
you
accept
guys,
it.
but
We accept it.
all right. Okay. So we will make sure. So looks like we do have a caller that's joining the show. But caller, please go ahead.
Hi, Attorney Pleas.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, I would like to know what is the best way to get in contact with you. I've been calling your office all week, and it looks like your voicemail is full.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's my fault because I'm actually in charge of my own phone this
Mm-hmm.
week. Things always flow a little more smoothly when I have some staff that's backing me up on things because I get a little backlogged. How about this? How about this? Because I don't want to put your number over the air. Will you kindly text me at that same number that you have for me, the 414-247-9570. Will you
Okay.
send me a text, please, with your name and your number, and you will get a call personally from me this afternoon when I get back to the office.
Okay, that'll be great. Now, I have another question. When do you determine to use a paralegal, and when is it best? When do you have to go with an attorney?
Well, paralegals are really to support the attorney. Um, if you're doing any type of estate planning documents, I would never recommend working solely with a paralegal. Although I have paralegals that work with me in support of my practice, everything that they do, any document that they may draft, must first go under the review of the licensed attorney before anything goes out with to the customer. So they really need to work in tandem. It's particularly if you're talking about estate related matters. Paralegals are not licensed to practice law. So there's a difference there in terms of what the expectations and responsibilities, and quite honestly, the extent of knowledge and expertise. So working with an attorney is always advisable. There may be some paralegals that can handle some steps of the process, but everything that goes out for the client's benefit needs to be reviewed and approved by a licensed attorney.
Okay, thank you. I will call and leave I will text my number to you.
Okay, we will be talking later today then. Thank you so
Oh,
much for calling in.
you're welcome. Bye.
Bye bye. Okay. So I appreciate the call. That's why I'm glad to be here on the radio show because sometimes it can be a very effective way to get connected with people. So I'm glad to be here and thanks that you guys have me. So I do want to make just if we have a couple minutes to make just some closing comments about the topic that we were on in terms of estate planning, and I gave the two different scenarios. And I want to say that sometimes people think that they can just put their properties or their savings accounts in their kids' names. If they, let's say you become ill and now you need the nursing home care and you think, okay, I will just put my home in my child's name, or I'll put my savings account in my child's name, so that your adult child is what I'm talking about, not a minor child, so that that will shield it or protect it somehow from having to be spent down for the nursing home care. Um, the challenge with that is that the federal laws require the laws that govern Medicaid that there's a 5-year look back window for any transfers to determine your eligibility for that nursing home care. So there'll be an application that you have to fill out. You'll have to disclose, the date upon which you transferred those assets, and you've got to be truthful, because if you're not, then if they find out later that you were not honest in the application, well, then you got another problem on your hands. So crisis planning, that's what I call it, when needing to go into the nursing home is imminent. That's not the way to go. The sweet spot that a lot of people rely upon is planning in their 60s or 70s, but there's no guarantee, because sometimes people can become ill at a younger age than that. So it's always best to seek wise counsel and sit with a professional that's going to be able to give you the proper recommendations. Um, Again, the other thing, if you consider putting your property or your bank assets in your kids' names, there's pros and cons to that, because you're giving up control. Unlike if you put matters in a revocable trust, you still remain in charge of that trust, and you get to decide still what happens with those belongings, as opposed to, here's my $400,000 savings account, let me put somebody else's name on it. If you've got a good kid and they're not going to go spending down your money, that's one thing. But what if you have a kid that takes it and runs with it and does whatever they want to do with it, and you have no legal recourse because you gave it to them when you put their name on there. Um, some people want to go ahead and spend their savings down. If they go into a nursing home, they may say, well, that's why I saved all my life. I've got this $400,000. Now I want my money to go to my nursing home care. I'm not trying to leave this $400,000 for my kids to do whatever they might want to do with it after I'm gone. I'm already going to leave them this $300,000 house that's free and clear. So I don't mind spending down my $400,000. I want to go to the nursing home that I want to go to, and maybe it's even more expensive, and maybe I'm able to afford it if I've got almost $500,000 tucked away. Again, that's another valuable right that you have, that you can handle it that way. Some people are okay to go ahead and spend it down. um, you can do a irrevocable trust, so that trust assets are not a countable resource that must be consumed. So that's a whole other thing, and that's very technical. So I don't want to get into too many specifics, but let's just suffice it to say that there's a difference between revocable trust and irrevocable trust, and how they shield your assets if somehow you needed to go into nursing home care. Okay, so I said a mouthful today, and I want to thank everyone for listening. Thank everyone who called in. Your input is always so very valuable. And special thank you to Debo and Jermaine for working with me with the show today. So I appreciate your input and look forward to seeing everybody next week with Money Talks with Attorney Coral. Thank you so much.